telomeres and the aging process. A telomere is a protective cap that's found on either end of a chromosome. It's composed of a repeated sequence of DNA, and in humans, as well as most other mammals, that sequence is TTAGGG. That's repeated hundreds of times to ultimately compose the telomere. And as you can see in this top image over here, the bright white spots at each end are the telomeres, as are the bright green spots in the bottom image. Telomeres protect the chromosome from loss of genetic information. However, the problem is after every cycle of DNA replication, the region shortens a little bit. It's a slow, gradual process, but eventually there will be loss of genetic information. The shortening of these telomeres is connected to the aging of the cells, and this could also explain the limited number of times cells can divide, which in humans is about 40 to 50 according to Hayflick's limit. These are also found in eukaryotic species. Telomerase is an enzyme that synthesizes the regions of each chromosome that house the telomere, and it can actually replace a DNA sequence that may have been lost during DNA replication. However, telomerase activity varies with human development. So during childhood, when we're growing, telomerase activity is very high, but as growth slows, so does telomerase activity. This results in shortened chromosomes of somatic cells, which are our body cells, and lost genetic information. A little bit deeper into the molecular genetics, telomeres are specifically terminal protein DNA complexes of linear eukaryotic chromosomes. And another reason why they're so important is because chromosomes with damaged or exposed ends tend to fuse together and are also prone to being broken down and degraded due to exon nuclease, which is an enzyme that cleaves off a nucleotide in a strand of polynucleotides. And telomerase is able to replace lost DNA sequences because it uses an RNA moiety as a template sequence and copies this into the DNA. Telomerase is very active in germ cells, which are our sex cells, some stem cells, as well as tumors. It unfortunately kind of fuels cancer and allows for cancer cells to continue to replicate without loss of any genetic information. As I mentioned before, its telomerase activity is fairly low in somatic cells after childhood. So there's no currently tested or proven method to slow aging or cure telomere-related diseases through the use of telomerase, but research does show that increased telomerase activity could in fact bring youth to aging cells and cure diseases such as dyskeratosis congenita, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, and aplastic anemia. Too much telomerase, however, could increase risk of cancer. As I talked about before, it is a fuel for cancer and tumor growth. So therefore, because of that, the overall goal is not to design something that will target all the cells in your body, but specifically stem cells to help with disease treatment and anti-aging therapy. A study was also done at a Spanish research center using mice that were generated from stem cells with extra long telomeres. They found that mice with the long telomeres lived 13% longer than normal mice, which is very significant. They also lived quite healthier lives than normal mice. They were more lean with less white fat and overall better metabolic health. There is one anti-aging product on the market that targets the telomeres, and that is an anti-aging pill called TA65. This claims to be an all-natural plant-based pill that allegedly lengthens, rebuilds, and maintains telomere length and overall increases your biological age, making you therefore live longer. However, there's very little proof that this actually works and costs $100 for a bottle of 30 capsules. This is extremely expensive, especially for something that may not actually work, and you need to be taking 1 to 4 capsules a day, apparently, which works out to be about $500 a month, which is very, very expensive and not worth it.
So, as Demetra has already said, there are currently no verified or thoroughly tested methods to slow the aging process or to treat telomere related illnesses. However, the research is relatively thorough, and gene therapies related to telomerase production and the length of telomeres in human cells have been proposed to treat a number of conditions and diseases in humans, the largest of which being cancers. So, in about 90% of cancer cells, there is a high level of active telomerase, meaning that in these cells, the telomerase is actively replacing and protecting the telomeres, and thereby allowing these cells to replicate almost infinitely without any damage to their genetic material. To treat this, it's been proposed that targeted enzyme inhibition could be a possible treatment for many types of cancers, as if you're able to target specifically the telomerase in these cancer cells, you may be able to inhibit the uh, the replacement of the telomeres, and thereby reducing cancer cells' ability to replicate without damage to its genetic material. And this could be a treatment in order to slow the rate at which cancer can grow. Also, certain age related illnesses have been linked to short telomeres in certain cells in the human body. So, if we were able to genetically alter these telomeres in order to lengthen them, then the risk that the genetic material of these cells could be damaged as they replicate could be greatly reduced. And these illnesses could be put off until later in life if the telomeres were lengthened. And finally, as we've discussed earlier, anti aging and regenerative therapies have been proposed. Obviously, if the enzyme telomerase could be synthetically introduced um, into the human body and into cells, then the telomeres could be replaced and protected, and thereby reducing the aging rate of certain cells in the human body. However, in the research that's been done, there is still a strong correlation between active telomerase and certain types of cancer. And so it cannot be verified yet whether or not introducing telomerase into the body.
So, there are not currently really any major economic implications with this topic. However, hypothetically, if there were to be some sort of telomere related solution to cellular aging, I think it would have an overall negative impact on the economy because, well, for starters, we are already living in an aging population, and we know as a fact that that isn't very good for the economy. So, it would just make those issues that much worse. There would be even more retired people than there are now who are no longer in the workforce and therefore no longer contributing. That would lead to an even bigger shortage of labor supply. There would be more people using resources, more elderly people in hospitals and long-term care homes, because though the cells would help you to live longer, that does not protect you against disease or physical trauma. There would be a decrease in production because of all of that, and ultimately an increase in the amount of money that the government must pay.
So obviously, there are some social and ethical issues surrounding this topic. Particularly, immortality and extended lifespans have some great social and ethical implications. First of all, without a natural death rate or with greatly extended lifespans, overpopulation could pose an even greater threat to our sustainability than it already does. So we can already see in our current world, with our current population, that overpopulation is posing a threat to sustainability. Resources become more and more scarce as our population grows, and we are having a significant impact on our environment, as we can see with global warming. Also, certain religious groups regard treatments to certain diseases or research into such issues as human immortality to be defying the will of God. You can see with certain religious groups, such as Jehovah's Witnesses around the world, Even taking a blood transfusion is seen as defying the will of God. And there's no reason to believe that something as great as human immortality, such a large issue, wouldn't be seen in the same respect. And so there may be a significant backlash. Um, Finally, treatments and therapies likely would not be made available to all. We can see in our world some things are reserved for the wealthy, and there's no reason to believe that something as valuable as an extension to human life wouldn't be seen in the same respect, and wouldn't be something that may only be affordable to the super wealthy. Regulations, policies, and laws. There are some regulations and laws around the world governing the editing of the human genome. And obviously, any experiments involving editing the human genome have been incredibly controversial in recent years, and governments and international conventions have cited the ethical implications of changing the genetic material of human cells, especially if it has the chance of being passed on to a future generation. So in Canada, this is actually regulated under the 2004 Assisted Human Reproduction Act, and it is punishable by up to 10 years in prison. However, it's more focused on the editing of the human genome in certain germ cells or gametes, as those do have the chance of passing that genetic material on to a future generation. Also, even the United Nations has cited their Human Rights Declaration with respect to maintaining human dignity as research is conducted and applied. And this was actually cited by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, in effect, trying to maintain human dignity and maintain the rights of a population if the genome is edited. Finally, some statistics. So obviously, age-related illnesses are very prevalent all around the world. Even in Canada, about 80% of Canadians 65 or older suffer from at least one chronic illness. About 70% suffer from at least two. In 2005, the life expectancy for Canadians was 78 for men and 82.7 for women. And about 1 in 11 Canadians over the age of 65 suffer from Alzheimer's disease or another related dementia. And finally, 1 in 2 Canadians is expected to develop cancer in their lifetime, and 1 in 4 is expected to die from cancer. So these are obviously all some statistics related to age-related illness and cancer in the case of the last one. And in fact, all of these are being investigated and researched for their relationship to telomeres and telomerase and how that might be used in order to avoid certain of these diseases, treat them, or cure them. Or in the case of life expectancy, how it can be used to extend that. In the case of cancer, obviously, as I said before, it's targeted enzyme inhibition. In the case of 90% of cancers, they have active telomerase, and if that can be inhibited, cell rate can be reduced.